Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special meeting of the Ashland Select Board. The agenda, my name is Robert Scher, and we have a quorum of the Select Board here tonight out in the audience. I think 4 of the 5 members are here, so I will call this meeting to order. This is a special meeting of the Select Board. As I think everyone knows, the single item on the agenda for tonight is a public forum on the use of the Valentine property. So welcome, everyone, and without further ado, I'm going to turn this forum over to our town manager, Michael Herbert. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, my name is Michael Herbert. I am the town manager here, and I want to welcome you all tonight to talk about the future of a property that has been in the town's possession for a few years now, and we're really excited to come up with a future reuse for it, and that's the Valentine property. Before I start getting too much into the presentation and start talking about this, I want to recognize, again, the select board members that are here: Rob Scher, Claudia Bennett, Brandy Kinsman, and Joe. I knew you were somewhere, Joe. Joe Mignani. So I wasn't wearing my glasses, Joe. And then also up here we have Doug Scott, who's our building commissioner, and Jen Ball, our assistant town manager, Beth Reynolds, our economic development director, and Doug Small, our DPW director. Each of them have had some role and played some role in the evolution of this property, and that's something that we're, again, really excited to talk about tonight. So what's the agenda? Well, tonight we want to review the recent history of the property, and then move and start talking about the restoration of the barn. Many of you saw over the course of a year that barn being restored to its former glory, and so we'll get a little bit more into the details of that. Next, we'll segue into going over the existing conditions and the limitations of the future reuse of the property, because that's going to help shape and guide what we're able to do with that in the future. Then we're going to review a proposed use that has been put together, and it's based upon the feedback that we had previously received through a number of different methods, and I'll get into that a little bit further as we get to that section. And then next steps, we'll discuss next steps, and then also at that point we're going to open this up for community feedback and discussion. Really looking forward to getting your input on this proposal, getting your thoughts, whether you agree with things, disagree with things, have some different ideas. Anyway, this will be an opportunity for you to share those with us. So, moving along. So let's talk about the history of the property. We're not going to go all the way back to the 16 and 1700s. Don't worry, I don't have a whole slideshow presentation on that. Although Beth is like, why not? We're going to start with something a little bit more recent. We're going to talk about the year 2017. And 2017 was the year that Capital Group Properties received a comprehensive permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals to build 120 units in 2 new buildings. Now, they were going to do a number of things with the property. One of the things is they were going to take the house and turn it into a clubhouse, but they really didn't have a proposed use for the barn. And so there were a number of discussions on what we could do with that, but really nothing was ever finalized. But they got a permit to build 120 units, but the developer actually wanted to appeal to what's known as the Housing Appeals Committee to build 140 units. So 120 units was not enough for them, go figure. So they wanted to do 140 units. But at the same time, the Select Board in a meeting agreed to try and negotiate a purchase of the property with the developer. So the developer is on one track looking at appealing their decision to get to build more units, and simultaneously, or concurrently if you will, the Select Board authorized myself and then the Select Board member Carl Hackinson to go and speak with Bill DePietri of Capital Group Properties to see if we could negotiate some type of purchase. After a series of discussions, we reached agreement with the developer to purchase the property for $3.5 million, and that was in March. I think it took us, what, a couple months, Carl, to get that done? Yeah, at least a couple of months. Yes, and it was a very high figure when we started out. You might think 3.5 million is high. Well, compared to 8, it seems relatively reasonable. But we did come up with that agreement back in 2018, And to effectuate that purchase, what we needed to do is get 2 votes. One was at town meeting in May of 2018, which we overwhelmingly were able to secure. We needed a 2/3 majority. I don't think it was unanimous, but it was close to unanimous. And then we also had a debt exclusion ballot vote in May of 2018, and this project, along with the Mendez School, they were on the same ballot. The Mendez School feasibility study passed with it was either 80 or 85% of the vote, pretty overwhelming majority. So also I should mention, as part of this whole negotiated purchase and process, we worked with the Einan Hicks family, who's here in attendance, Robin and Cynthia, to actually put a deed restriction on their property if we were successfully able to buy the property. And so they very generously, and I want to underline the word very generously put a deed restriction limiting development on their property. And so that was part of it as well. So moving forward, we ended up, now we've inherited like a barn that's fallen apart and a house that's not in the greatest shape. Property that's a little bit overgrown, so, where do you start? Well, we hired a property manager, David Foster, many of you know David, to help secure the house and the barn and start cleaning it out, which he did so. And then we had a public forum in 2019, and coming out of that forum, the Select Board agreed to form what's known as the Valentine Property Committee. And we'll get a little bit more into what the Valentine Property Committee did, but they worked for a couple of years, came up with a recommendation that ultimately we decided not to move forward with. And so again, we're still left with the property that needed to be taken care of, mainly the barn. So after purchasing it in 2018, after years of stops and starts, we finally came to an agreement on a process on how to restore this barn. And the Select Board agreed to use $750,000 in ARPA funds to help restore and preserve the shell of the barn. And then CPC funds were also used for that. CPC meaning Community Preservation Act funds, or CPA funds, I should say. So I mentioned a little bit before about the Valentine Property Committee. So that group was initially charged with assisting the town in identifying both proper and feasible reuses of the Valentine property by soliciting and reviewing proposals from interested properties. And so that group it was about 9 members, did a ton of work, putting together, basically doing a lot of research, first of all. And I was part of that committee, and we looked at different properties in different towns that were similar. So, for example, we went to Natick and looked at the Natick Community Organic Farms. I don't know if you're familiar with that property. We also looked at the Holliston Historical Society, our neighbors next door. We looked at the Josiah Smith Tavern in the town of Weston, which was purchased by that town maybe 20, 25 years ago, and they were still having a hard time figuring out what to do with it. And then finally, we looked at the Medway Thayer Homestead. So some of you in the audience here, maybe some of you watching at home, have been to the Thayer Homestead and know what kind of unique property that is. So after reviewing all those properties, we came up with basically preferred uses through an RFP process. And we put that out to bid, RFP meaning request for proposals. And we received one proposal from a developer to purchase the property, for the sale of the property. And ultimately, the committee made a recommendation to the Select Board not to move forward with that proposal. First of all, we found out that we weren't necessarily able to sell it or actually enter into a long-term lease with it. And then it was just overall, it was deemed overall not just in the best interest of the town to move forward with it. And again, like I mentioned before, the focus at that point in time became not necessarily on the future use of the property, but how do we restore this barn in order to maintain it so we can maintain it for future use. If that makes sense. So we'll get into a little bit on the renovation of the barn, and I'm sure Doug will be here to help me out to talk a little bit about it. So as you can see here, here's a couple really bad pictures of the barn the way it was before. It was really, really dark in there. The picture on the left, you can see that's the foundation. You can see stable is not a word that you would use to describe it. It's kind of balancing, teeter-tottering on rocks. You can see the general condition of the barn in the middle and the rightmost picture. Please excuse my daughter in the middle one. She's giving it a thumbs up, saying that yes, we need to restore this thing. But it was in pretty bad shape. Over the years, we had holes had developed in the roof. There was a lot of rot that had developed, especially on one side. So it wasn't going to be an easy proposition to go ahead and restore this property. But we're fortunate to have a building commissioner who is very experienced in timber frame properties, and that's really kind of one of the things that makes this property, this barn, so unique, is that it is a timber frame building. And it's got this unique joinery and unique structure that's really designed to keep it holding up even if like one corner is gone, which actually that was the case with this property. One corner was basically not structurally sound and the thing was still standing up. But we embarked upon that renovation, or restoration I should say. And Doug, I don't know if you want to come up and talk a little bit about just some of the restoration process. And, well, I guess you don't have to get up. You can just sit right there and do it. You can push a button. We are in the 20th century. And just talk about maybe some of the methods and the methodology and some of the joinery and stuff that were used.
So what ended up happening is that I was asked for my thoughts on the barn and what we could do with it. My first thought was just light a match and let's walk away. But no, I'm kidding. So after walking through it, we came up with a game plan. We went back and forth. One of the options was to take it down completely, piece by piece, label everything, build all new. There's probably about 70% of it that would be new, and then put a new foundation in, and then put it back together. And but that didn't seem to be something that we could get everybody behind. So we put it out to bid to do renovations to it. I wrote up a specs. We were very lucky to get a contractor, company out of Rhode Island, that had a foreman, superintendent, that was familiar with timber frame work. So we were able to, or I was able to have many conversations with him about the type of joinery that I wanted them to use to put it back together, how we were going to scarf the rotted pieces from the rotted sections on some of the timbers, whole timbers that needed to be replaced, and really didn't, to be honest, we really didn't have a full idea how much was going to have to be done until we finished cleaning it out. Taking out the horse stalls and taking out a lot of what was superfluous to the actual frame of the building. And as that happened and we were unveiling the structure, we found areas that we needed to do wholesale replacement, and some areas where we could scarf some joints. Scarfing a joint is where you're cutting a timber, you're cutting it a certain way to be able to add new pieces to it. And
Doug, I'm just going to highlight like a place where you did that right here.
yes, that is one of them. So everything that's replaced was replaced with oak pegs. That was one of my demands, that we weren't using any mechanical fasteners to put this back together. It was originally, and it still is, and it was an oak. I mean, I'm not sure if it was all oak. More than likely, it was the pegs, and it was put together that way. So when we put it back the same exact way. you know, we had, as part of this, about when we had it all opened up and we realized that we had a substantial amount of replacement work that we needed to do, I was able to work a change order. There was close to $400,000 that it ended up, in the long run, costing the town a little over $30,000, because I did some horse trading. Areas that we didn't need to do, that we didn't have to go crazy on, trading those in for credits for work that we did need to do. So, and the other thing is that all the wood in there, except for the flooring, is hem fir. Typically, what I used to build timber frame homes, and they were all out of oak. But nowadays, oak is crazy stupid, and you have to be able to cut it within 3 days of when it's cut as a tree. So we used hem fir, which gave some latitude and some time to be able to properly fit things. We had to take the back left corner, we had to take that. That's a 30-foot tall, 8x8 piece of hem fir, supporting under the basement, which you don't see. We have a whole series of, we got a 30-foot long and a 28-foot long 10x10 hem fir beam, which we all chiseled. These are all hand chiseled. There's no machinery used in it. And the goal was to make it safe and sound. We didn't beautify it. There's no electricity to the building, but it is now standing solid, and it should last another 150 years.
Awesome. Thank you, Doug. And just kind of expound a little bit on what Doug was saying. Some cases, so the sheathing of the barn, when that was too rotted beyond repair, Doug actually went up to or Mill City, under Doug's direction, actually went up to a barn in Maine, an old barn in Maine, and reclaimed some of that lumber and used that as sheathing. For the roof, that was originally 1x12s. They were all pretty much rotted. I think that's a fair thing to say. I don't think that's going to surprise anybody who saw the tarp blowing in the wind. But anyway, that was all replaced with 1x12 sheathing, and then architectural grade shingles. And again, as Doug mentioned, all the joinery is hand done. It really is just, you know, I grew up on a farm, so barns have some kind of sentimental value to me and some sentimental interest. But really, if you're just a student of architecture, you could probably really have an appreciation for such a barn. It's just really, really unique. You can get a little sense of the framework here at the top. I know this picture isn't the greatest, but some of these things are actually just cable to keep it. Well, it disappeared, everybody. So, well, okay, we're back now. All right.
There we are.
You can just see some of the complex joinery there that's utilized to keep it upright and keep it going. So that was really the story of the renovation behind the barn. And so I'll move forward. And here's some pictures of the barn that's 95% done. The first thing that I noticed as I walked in there is that you can get a lot more light compared to those pictures from before the renovation. That's because we uncovered the fact that there were boarded up windows there, and so we were able to replace those with wood windows. Some of the other windows that were broken we were able to replace. So there's a lot of natural light that gets in there, especially compared to the way it was previously. It's a pretty wide open floor plan right now. The outside of the barn is cedar shingles that's been painted, and I'm trying to think of any other relevant relevant things other than what Doug and I have mentioned. Can't really think of anything else. Like Doug said, our goal was to restore this property and to keep it as historical as possible. And we were very, very fortunate, I will say, because there was some question about how historical the restoration was. And we were very fortunate to be on a historical commission meeting with a historical consultant named Stacy Spies, who is working with the Historical Commission on a local historic district. That's for another forum. But she was able to give us her opinion on what she thought about the renovation, or the restoration, I should say. And she was very, very pleased with it from a historical perspective. Thought that we were going above and beyond, really, what we needed to do as part of that. So those are pictures of the barn afterwards.
The one, if I could, the one thing I didn't tell you was the interior of the basement. So we rebuilt a good section of the foundation. That foundation was a mix of rock, stone, concrete, brick, it was a hodgepodge.
Mishmash.
So we left the exterior. What we did was we poured on average, a 12-inch thick, one-sided wall around the entire interior, and there's a concrete floor in that now. So there would be no movement for any of that. That was quite the undertaking.
Yeah, it really was a massive project. So let's move forward to existing conditions. So I showed you what the barn looks like now, maybe a few tweaks since we took those pictures. But moving forward now, let's talk about the rest of the property and the existing conditions, mainly the land. So we're very fortunate that we have Carl Hackinson and Robin Hicks here, along with several other volunteers, actually many volunteers, worked very, very hard to clear this property of all the brush and most of the invasive species that were on the remaining acreage of the property, which the total acreage of the property, I realize I didn't say that in the beginning, is 7.7 acres. So, it's not a plantation by any means, but it's certainly a good-sized property. And they spent a lot of work and a lot of hot days working with some mechanical equipment. Greg Wands. Greg, I can't believe I didn't mention you by name specifically here. Greg did a lot of work as well in clearing that property and making sure that basically it's a blank palette, I guess you could say, for the future use. There was a wilderness corridor that was untouched for wildlife to utilize. And basically, there's been a path that's been cut to utilize and enjoy the property. And then when we're talking about existing conditions, I should also mention the house, of course. The house is the other building on the property. The house is a really, really unique mishmash, we're going to use that term again since it's a technical term, of different styles in different centuries and different generations, I guess you could say. As you can see here through some of these pictures, and I want to point out that these pictures are a few years old, so the house is not in as good a condition as you see right now. But in the back, there is a very, very large kitchen area. In the front, as you walk into the old house, which is a two-center chimney colonial home that was built around the in the late 1800s. The original house was in the 1700s. As you walk into the front, you see these nice, great rooms with these big fireplaces and a couple of picture windows that were added over the course, I think around the 1920s. They were added. And so it's really just kind of a grand entrance as you walk in. Makes a big difference when you can come in and you have all of this space that you can utilize and think of different uses for. But I will have to say, for the most part, this house is chopped up pretty good. When I say chopped up, a lot of rooms have been made. I think it was a rooming house at one point. There's been all kinds of activities that have been found at the Valentine property. I think there was some gaming that was done maybe back in the day. I see a couple smiles out in the audience. People know what I'm talking about. But in any case, that's the existing conditions of the house, just a brief existing condition of the house. Now, before we start talking about the proposal and the proposed reuse of the property, let's talk about some of the current limitations that we had in help shape this proposal, all right? So first of all, this land is considered Chapter 97 land. So Chapter 97 is part of the Massachusetts Constitution. It is designed to protect open space and parkland and environmentally sensitive property throughout Massachusetts. It's got a number of restrictions associated with it, but a primary one that affects this property is that it prohibits the sale and the long-term lease of the property. Because it's Chapter 97 land, it also can't be used for commercial for-profit use. So that's a limitation as well as part of the property. Since we utilize CPA funds, and since Robin and Cindy's deed restriction on their property was contingent upon having a CPA restriction on the Valentine property, we have CPA restrictions, Community Preservation Act restrictions, on the property as well, which requires that the property be used in accordance with the CPA guidelines. And I'll go in a little bit deeper into the conservation restriction later. But that conservation restriction also limits the ability to add buildings to the property. Now, there are certain instances where, for ancillary purposes or maybe educational purposes, you could build some type of structure, but it can't be deleterious to the property or take away from it in its historical and ecological value. There's significant wetlands on the property. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with wetlands, they're environmentally sensitive areas that require permitting. And, they provide some necessary complications with putting together a use for the property. You have to work around it to a certain extent. We also have limited parking availability. So everybody, if you ask anybody, what's a main concern of downtown or any place, people will say parking, or a lot of people will say parking. Well, the same thing, you can say that for the Valentine property as well. There's limited space for parking. It also must have a tourism aspect to it. So when the American Rescue Plan Act came out and funds were distributed, there were a set of guidelines that communities had to follow in order to be able to utilize those properties. And one of them was that you could use the property for tourism and economic development. And so that is what the rationale we utilized to tap into ARPA funds to redo the barn. So now it has that attachment to it. So we have to have some kind of tourism aspect to it. It doesn't have to be the main thing, but there has to be some level of tourism associated with it. And that's a very broad definition as well. And then finally, operations at this point in time in Ashland's development, it must be self-sustaining. So we can't have a property that bleeds money and does not have expenses that exceed our revenue. I should have pointed out here, it doesn't mean that revenue has to exceed the operating cost, but it at least has to meet it. So we have to have something that's revenue neutral, unless the town decides to move in a different direction and start putting more money into the general fund budget. So those are the current limitations on the property. Let's see how I'm doing for time here. I mentioned the conservation restriction, and the conservation restriction really has a number of elements associated with it and a number of purposes. First, it's supposed to provide a framework for the house and the barn and the grounds and what you can use it for and how you maintain it, especially the historical properties, the house and the barn. It provides an opportunity for us to both host public and private events at the property. It provides protection for wildlife habitat. I mentioned that wildlife corridor being a key component of that. It provides protection for parkland and open space. You saw all of that land, a good majority of that, or practically all of that space that I showed in the pictures, needs to stay as open space. It also provides an opportunity to continue its agricultural heritage. This property has As you can imagine, a distinguished history as an agricultural property throughout the years, being utilized in a number of different formats. Or an orchard. It was actually at one point, I believe, Cliff, you might want to help me out here. I believe it was a place where it was almost like a self-sustaining farm where people, you know, they basically grew the food that they ate there. Wasn't necessarily for commercial purposes. Cliff's nodding his head, so I'm going to go, if that's okay. Kinda. Okay. We'll stick with kinda. And then finally, and I think the most important part, it gives us an opportunity to learn about and then also celebrate Ashland's history, not just the history of the Valentine property, but the history of Ashland itself. And so with all of that in mind, that is what helped shape the proposed use that we're talking about tonight. I should also point out that this use has been shaped not only through the restrictions and the limitations that I went through before, but also through multiple public forums. I mentioned the Valentine Property Committee's work. We also had a survey that we utilized to help figure out what kind of uses people wanted to see the property. Oh. Are we good, Paul and Mackie?
Yeah, I think they can't hear you. Take me out of the Zoom call for a second. We're good now.
Okay. All right. That was a planned dramatic entrance for the proposal here, everybody. So, again, just to close up, we've gathered a lot of public feedback on the use of this property, and that has what's shaped this proposal. Before I forget, Kate Valentine and her husband also provided input on this property and what it could be used for, and provided a vision for that. And so this incorporates aspects of that as well. So first, I'll just go over this little green area here, which was that open space area, which I showed pictures of earlier that Carl and Robin and Greg and others had worked on. So that will, under this proposal, that would remain as open space. And you would have walking paths along the property, and then you would also maintain that undisturbed wildlife corridor. There's also the possibility that we could use this for agricultural use. Again, there's some significant wetlands, and they mainly occur following that little green dot, and it expands over here. But there's potential for agricultural use through that property. The blue area that you see here is the historic house and then also the barn. Both areas would have multiple functions and purposes. That's something that we'll get into the future slides. And then finally, although small, this red area is dedicated for parking. And there's a couple of different algorithms or calculations that you can utilize. They're very basic, very generic, that you can utilize to determine how many parking spots that you can get out of a certain space. So we think we can get, a little over 50 parking spaces on this piece of property, this little section right here. Sorry about that. So let's start with the barn. So the barn has still that rustic look, as you can see, and really it most lends itself to being reused as something like the Holliston Historical Society, which is used for private engagements, weddings. I don't know if you've driven by when there's a wedding there, but it's really cool to look at, especially on a nice summer night. When you see all the lights outside and you see the doors are all open and you can see inside. A little bit different than the Holliston Historical Society in the sense that the Holliston Historical Society right now has a concrete floor, and then it also has a kitchen that's built in the back. Again, it would be available for rent, so for weddings, birthday parties, other private events. But it could also be used, as the town would own it, it would also be used for different town meetings and different functions and different events. So we would have the possibility to maybe utilize this as an arm of the farmers market, if you will, or have a town meeting or a town forum there or something to that effect. I would be partial to a bluegrass concert myself, but not everybody shares my love of music that way. It could also serve as a location for one of Ashland's hidden gems, which I think is a hidden gem, which is the Ashland Community Theater. They put on performances, and they generally have those at the VFW. But this could also serve as a location for Ashland Community Theater with significant retrofits. And then also, it could also serve as a place to learn more about traditional arts and crafts, such as woodworking, metalsmithing, fiber arts. This is something that can make Ashland really unique in the region. You have Hopkinton Center for the Arts, which does a lot of theatrical, musical work, as well as a bunch of visible mediums as well. You have Amazing Things Art Center in Framingham that is dedicated towards music and theater, and then TCAN in Natick, which is dedicated towards music. We really don't have something here that's dedicated to like old-time agricultural and trade work. Some of those things that are being lost throughout the generations, things like stone wall building, stacking is what they call it, other things like that. The house also would serve multiple purposes. So the rooms on the first floor that I talked about, those bigger rooms, those more open rooms, they would be used as a conference and meeting room facility. That back kitchen that I mentioned way in the back of the building, so that could be retrofitted and used as a kitchen to support functions in the house and then also the barn. And thanks to Beth, we already have equipment, commercial kitchen equipment for that property, so we wouldn't have to go through the expense of that. The rest of the first floor would be used as a place to support barn functions as well. One of the things I forgot to put here is that we could use it as maybe a museum for the Valentine family or even Ashland history. There's a lot of different ways we could utilize these spaces. They don't just have to be for one particular thing. You could have a changing room maybe for a wedding party, but at the same time, you could have that filled with Ashland history and history dedicated to the Valentine family. And then finally, the second floor would be utilized for municipal offices. And specifically, I'm talking about the creation of a new Parks and Recreation Department that would be headquartered, I guess you could say, on the second floor. And the duties of that would include managing the rentals for the Valentine barn, maintaining and renting out the athletic fields in town, and as well as using future recreational programs. And that's in addition to the site at the community center. I don't want people to think that this is a replacement for the programs and the location at the community center right now, the existing programs and location. And then that's generally the proposal overall in a nutshell. Doug, do you want to speak to the Parks and Rec department and the need? So as Doug walks up here, we're in a very unique situation here in Ashland in that we don't have a Parks and Rec department. Our DPW actually maintains the fields and all the athletic fields, including the rentals and things like that. And so what's become very, very apparent over the years is that we need, I told you you should have got up here in the first place, is that we need a more enhanced department that's really dedicated towards this type of work.
Hi.
Doug. All you.
Okay, we good? All right. Yeah, I mean, it's like, where do we begin? And I don't want to bore everybody with the history. A lot of the people in the room were right there, 15 years ago when we first put the artificial turf field. We replaced Walker Field with the artificial turf field at the old middle school, at the old high school, I should say. And then a year later, we had the new high school field complex built, which was a second artificial turf field along with a bunch of other fields, baseball, softball, and so on and so forth. And what worries me is every time I talk about this, everybody's going to get used to just Doug complaining, Doug Scott. So it's back to the foundation. But anyway, but yeah, and I hate sounding that way and all this stuff. But if anybody in this room has ever been involved with renting fields, managing fields, the operation of fields, anything like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. As everybody knows, the DPW, we take care of essential services for the town of Ashland, and fields, recreational fields, sports, and it doesn't fit with the DPW. One of the big issues is, games are played at night or on the weekends, and we're not geared that way. The actual budget itself is not funded appropriately in order to cover nights and weekends and things like that. And then throw on top of that the school department, who has first right to the fields. So, anyways, like I said, we've been talking about this for years, and I don't want to come out as complaining, but all the other cities and towns around us have a Parks and Rec department, as far as I know. We obviously we have a rec department already with Kelly Rund, but I really think that ever since the artificial turf fields came along, that we should have been really looking at putting a Parks and Rec department in, and for everybody that was involved over the years, it was just a massive undertaking. There were many, many people involved in this whole thing, this whole program, and they did a wonderful job with the high school fields and all that, and we fell short, unfortunately, as far as putting in a program to actually rent the fields and book the fields, so on and so forth. But if it was easy, it would have been done already. But there have been some terrific people involved in many groups and all this stuff, and we've never been able to complete it. And anyway, so is there anything else you want me to add?
No, Doug, that's great. So, Doug always loves it when I call on him, especially unannounced. He does a good job, doesn't he, folks? He does good. So, all right. So that's the Parks and Recreation Department. And then finally, you got a sneak peek of this, but we got one final curveball here with the Valentine property. So, has anybody ever heard of the invasive spotted lanternfly? If you have, please raise your hand. Oh my gosh. Not as rare as I thought, maybe. So this invasive insect has the ability to just really deforest and devegetate practically anything it gets on. And so the Massachusetts Department of Agricultural Resources, I'm just not even going to try, also known as MDAR, they actually have the property under quarantine after they found that the spotted lanternfly was on the property. And so we're working with them right now on treatment options, but right now it's hard for us to do any kind of activity on it until we get MDAR's permission. So that's something that is constantly evolving, and we're getting more information about that. We've authorized treatment on the property, so hopefully that won't set us back too far and won't do too much damage. And yeah, that's about it. So next steps.
Michael,
yeah, Robin.
get a hold of us?
I'm sorry?
Our adjoining property, can you have them get a hold of us?
I can.
I'm spotted here on our property also.
Sure. So what are the next steps now, once we get rid of the lanternfly? So we're having a public forum tonight, right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to take the feedback that we get tonight, and we're going to incorporate that into a revised plan that we will present to the select board at a future date. At that point, once we have a use determined and a direction determined, we can hire an architect and an engineer who can provide more information on the feasibility of the plan. They can do things like evaluate it for ADA compliance, do samples for parking, et cetera. And then that group could also work on a high-level estimate on the cost of renovations. And so once we get the cost, we can look at that. We can look at what our next steps are going to be. Do we move forward with it? Do we move forward in a phased approach? Do we try to take care of it all at once? And if we do, how are we going to fund it? That's a big question with any town project, is what are we going to use to fund these projects? There's a variety of sources that we could utilize, each with their own little idiosyncrasies, but it's certainly possible. I don't want people to walk away from this thinking that it's impossible. We've done a lot of awesome things before, and this has the possibility to be basically a gem, I think, of Metro West, not just Ashland, but the region, considering all the proposed uses that we were talking about, which I know it's varied, but I don't think it's so much that it dilutes any one particular use's influence or power, if you will. That's not the right word, but it's the best one I can come up with for right now. So anyway, I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening and appreciate you coming. And we'll open it up for questions. What we'll do is, or comments. Mackie, do we still have the mic back there?
Yeah, right
The handheld mic?
Yep.
Okay.
Thing.
Is that coming up in the room?
Hello, hello.
Yeah.
All right.
Awesome. So Yolanda, you're going to go first?
No, I'm walking.
Are you going to walk the mic around? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. So, Robin Hicks.
Robin, is this on? Hello?
Yep.
Robin Hicks, 11 Franklin Road. For the next meeting, I'm sure there's going to be multiple meetings, but I feel that this wasn't advertised properly. Maybe a A-frame and sign in front of the Valentine estate saying meeting. I put up some bulletin boards around town. Don't tell anyone, but in the post office, it's probably illegal, but I put it up anyways. And stuff some mailboxes. So I don't know if anyone got those, but I think a few people did. And there should be 100 people at this meeting instead of, I don't know, maybe there's 40.
29 online.
Good, great.
Yeah, and I believe this is also being broadcast over Facebook, so there could be many watchers on Facebook as well. But thanks for your comments, and thanks for doing what you did to advertise the program.
Of course.
Barty?
Hi, Barbie. Can you hear me? Is
I
it coming
can.
out? Hello. This is Barbie. I live on Bryden Road. I think our street should be notified of what's going on with insects so that we can also do something about it because they're just going to come and see us. The other thing is I agree that a lot of people did not know about it. I don't know if we can put it on bulletin boards at the supermarkets. They probably don't like advertising, but everybody goes to the supermarket. And I guess that's all. I thought this meeting might incorporate more than it is today, but this is good.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Any comments on like the proposal, or I hear everybody in terms of like the advertisement and the attendance. Hey, Carl.
Michael, do you want to say, is this on? Do you want to say a few words about the holder of the conservation restriction and how that works?
I can. I would rather you say something about it because you have you know a lot more that you can say than I
I'll be
can.
here for another 45 minutes, so maybe you should do it.
They can't hear online, so this mic's not really working. I'm getting a bunch of messages that it's nearly impossible to hear the question, so.
Okay, is it possible to turn that up, Mackie?
It's like, kind of maxed out. It's coming through on the stream.
It could be that it's not here, it would be heard via Zoom.
Okay.
So they might need to go up to that microphone or wait for it.
Yeah, why don't you come to the podium and talk.
44 maybe. Anyway, Michael mentioned that it's subject to a conservation restriction, and a lot of times people don't know what that means. And for a number of reasons, the CPA requirement mainly, and the Article 97 aspect that Michael talked about that really emanated from the language of the Town Hall warrant article, required a conservation restriction. And so how that works is you have to find someone that's certified by the state to hold the restriction. And the restriction is a document that pretty much lays out everything that can, in a nutshell, everything that can and cannot happen at the property. And so the property is owned by the town, but it's supervised from that aspect by the holder. And the holder in this case is the Hopkinton Area Land Trust. We worked out an agreement with them earlier in the year. The select board and Michael have the draft of the conservation restriction. It's now being reviewed by the state. But a lot of times people say, why can't we do this or why can't we do that? And the answer almost always emanates from what does it say in the conservation restriction. And this conservation restriction, it has a lot of leeway. It was a little bit of a different restriction because it has a historical aspect to it as well. And so finding a holder was a little bit challenging because most conservation groups don't want to be involved in things outside of raw land. And obviously this is more than raw land. So a lot of things that will happen going forward with the town just have to be coordinated with the Hopkinton Area Land Trust, and they've been very accommodating to this point. Does that kind of clarify things? Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. Luba, do you want
Thank you. I have some slides that I put together. Yes, of course. I would love for the slides to be up. It would really help me. You could, but the people online won't be able to see them. Well, let's see how it goes. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Luba Zorova. I've been a resident of Ashland for about 5 years. So about the time since you guys have been having these discussions about the property. And this is the first time that I'm participating in it and have something. I do need one copy.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay. Yes, thank you. Yes, so I live near Warren Center off of Chestnut Street. I have 3 kids, 4, 6, and 11-year-old boys. And my 4-year-old has been attending Adventures in Learning program in Ashland, which's been, hi Brandy, has been open since 2019 or 2020, and it has been absolutely the highlight of his week. I've never seen my boy that happy. Unfortunately, he can only attend once a week for 3.5 hours. But I came here to speak for nature-based education and for an idea of having that use on a property to be the anchor use that provides the revenue stream, and other uses being the supportive and complementary to that. And the reason for that is that I feel that nature-based and outdoor learning is a very big need in the town. And I'm very confident it will provide the revenue stream that is needed to balance out the budgetary concerns that the town has. And basically my slides are making a case for it. And I just want to go really quickly through it. I guess my goal tonight is to voice the vision for the property, because I think the unified vision is missing a bit. People are talking about different things, but there's no one thing that is really clicking with everyone. And so that's my chance at speaking for it. I also feel like I'm speaking for the parents who are in the thick of raising children, holding down a job, and not being able to participate in these type of community meetings. I'm paying a babysitter right now for my children, for someone to take care of my children, so I can be here. But I do think it's a need, and I've spoken to many parents who are in support of it, and I'm very confident if we go out there with this idea, there will be a lot of support for it. So the vision for the anchor use of this property, not the only one obviously, but is for Ashland to become the regional center for local outdoor nature-based and environmental education for preschool through high school children, meeting the challenges of our society and the needs of the working families. Nature-based education promotes enthusiasm for learning, movement, physical activity, advanced problem-solving skills, creativity, problem-solving, conflict resolution, relationship building, raising environmental stewards of tomorrow, and also allows for more customized approach to each kid. I think it's intuitively it makes sense to most people that kids learn the best in a hands-on environment outdoors. And there are pictures on the presentation to show that. So kids explore, they take risks, it improves their fine motor skills. We all know that, unfortunately, children are overstimulated with screens. There's a lot less outdoor playing. Kids don't go to each other's houses anymore. They don't ride bikes. These are the societal issues that I'm describing. I think the model for what can be at this place is this little program, this little gem in Ashland, Adventures in Learning, that I recently learned is closing. And it's closing because Courtney, who runs this program, she may be known by many in the community. She doesn't have an indoor space. She doesn't have a licensed building for kids. And so they cannot really spend more than 3.5 hours outdoors. They're 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds. And COVID also was impacted her program. And financially, it only makes sense if she can offer something full-time. And the only limitation is imagination, really, for what she has to offer. I'm not specifically saying, trying to put Courtney in charge of this program. I'm just saying it's an amazing model. We already have it in Ashland. We can work off of it. So that's really the idea. And so why should we consider children as the primary benefactors of the Valentine property? I feel like we haven't really talked about them as much as I wish, I guess, as a parent. Access to child care is difficult. Women get in line for child care the moment they find out they're pregnant. That is ridiculous, frankly, waiting for daycare slot to open for 9 months at a time. Access to affordable and quality child care is difficult. Cost of child care in Massachusetts is the second most expensive one in the country after California. It's more expensive than mortgage. So we don't have enough of it, and it's not always high quality, and you have to wait a long time for it. So sometimes it makes families make very difficult decisions that they otherwise wouldn't want to do. So I did mention that I feel like parents are not represented in this general discussion because they just can't find the time. And so I'm speaking for some of them. So as an example of the need, Ashland's current public preschool has an enrollment of 81 children, and the wait list is 48, and it's very common. So you have the need far exceeding what the town can provide. Ashland is expected to continue to grow by about 10%. Per census, 25% of people living in Ashland are children under the age 18. We're talking about a quarter of population who can benefit from this. I think this particular use would be a great fit for the property. As I mentioned, it would serve public and community need for childcare and after-school care for all different ages. It would be more affordable, or at least as affordable as other options, except that it would provide an outdoor learning component, which a lot of parents really love, and it fits the needs of many children. I believe this use would be compatible with the conservation restriction and historical restriction on a property. So the whole issue of, leasing, you cannot lease or rent to commercial properties, that's a non-issue. It would align with sustainability committee goals of contributing to environmental education in the town. It's within walking distance to middle school. Kids could just walk after school and learn how to garden or to raise animals or do farming and then sell their produce at the Ashland farmers market, for example. There are just so many connections to the curriculum, science, environmental, math, and the income stream. As I mentioned, parents are paying for childcare, obviously, and that would just kind of come full circle and support the operations of the building itself. So for that to work, the town would need to either lease to a nonprofit entity to run a program like that. That's one option, except that I'm not really sure what short-term lease versus long-term rental. Are we talking months or a couple of years?
Long-term lease is usually considered 5 years or more.
Okay, so, it has to be something that makes sense from the nonprofit organization to invest in at least a 5-year. Like, they need a little bit of certainty. So the location is across the street from Ashland State Park. In terms of programming that you, again, nature-based outdoor type of programming could be done in the summer. It could be in partnership with Ashland Recreation offerings already. If people like the idea, I think a phased approach would make most sense. You would start with phase 1, where you kind of use the adventures and learning model of opening a preschool program first. That's where the need is the greatest. But it would be a full day. I'm sure if they started, they would easily enroll 20 kids, and that's a good revenue stream for kids. To run the property from financial perspective. And another benefit is that this anchor use would not interfere with other potential uses on site, such as offices, renting out the barn for functions. You mentioned birthday parties. I just took my 4-year-old for his birthday party at another farm in Sherburne. That's $500 for 11 kids. That's a stand-and trade. So, you could literally leverage the program and the animals to rent it for kids' birthday parties. I'm sure that would be a hit. The one thing I didn't mention are animals. So Adventures in Learning, they have a couple of goats, some chickens. Kids come and they brush the goats. They chop up, kale and feed it to them. They gather eggs. These are just introductory learning on how to take responsibility for taking care of animals and dig dirt and play and learn how to count rocks and so many other great things. So these are just my initial ideas. I do have a little table here on slide 14 of different types of programming for preschoolers, so 3 through 6, for after-school activities for, let's say, kindergarten through middle school, and then after-school programs for middle and high school could include even programs like 4-H. I don't know if you guys know that, that's kind of more advanced, but the property seems to be a perfect fit for all of it. Nature learning, wildlife corridor, wetlands, you can learn the curriculum opportunities to plug in the public school kids would be amazing. I think in 2019 during the forum, you mentioned looking into Natick Community Farm and how it's such an institution in town. People care so much about it, right? They made millions of dollars to just rebuild the barn. What they mention is that every single student in Natick Public Schools comes to the farm at some point. They are invested in it. It's part of their town. That's what I would imagine this place to be as well. And I'm coming to that. I know it's taking a little while. There's a slide about different types of models out there. It would be something that would be ours, but there are a lot of ideas on this type of outdoor learning, communities and farms and schools. And I know people were talking about that not too many people show up to these forums. I know the Ashland Moms group on Facebook is very active and has hundreds of members. And I'm sure if an idea was pitched to them, you could do some kind of voting on Facebook. I don't know if it complies with town. open meeting law, and we can discuss this. I wanted to speak about this idea at the Sustainability Committee as well to get their endorsement, because we have to teach our kids how to be more responsible stewards of Earth, and this is the way to do it, and we have a place to do it, and I feel like it's a perfect opportunity for it. And I'm not just speaking for my kids, it's all the future kids. And yeah, Comprehensive Planning Committee. I plan to talk about it too as well as a vision, long-term vision for the town. So this is really an appeal to make the Valentine property serve our children and to invest in our future. Thank you very much.
Can you tell them how someone can get these that are watching?
I
Yeah,
can
you want me to put
email
it- yeah,
you
why
the
don't you email?
slides.
Can I have that, Lou? Do you mind if I have?
Can I ask you some questions? What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're talking about a preschool program, a licensed childcare program.
Yes.
Other uses could also, what are you envisioning for the preschool program? What would it be, what buildings would it be used?
Oh, yes, the house, not the barn. Yeah. The barn has no insulation, no water, no sewer. So you need, for the licensed place,
The house doesn't have sewer either.
but it will.
Okay.
It will.
Okay.
It should and must. I mean, didn't you say that the house needs to support
It
the
does.
activities for the barn, so for the kitchen to work, and it needs water and sewer. I mean, I know it will take time and money, but
You can do anything with time and money.
yeah, I know. You just need a vision first, and then everything
I think
will
we've
align.
put together a pretty good vision.
Yeah, no, I think I'm just building on what has been done to date. I think a lot of great work was done. I'm just emerging at this particular period of time because of my personal situation, and yeah, that's my, yeah,
I think it's a great idea. Lou.
okay.
I really do. And I don't think it's like mutually exclusive of some of
No.
the things that we're talking about, but
It's complementary,
just
yeah.
real question.
Yeah.
Can you tell me, like just in general, not necessarily how much you pay, but in general, how much is childcare a week? It used, when Nora was going to school, it was like a weekly thing.
Yes, yeah. It varies anywhere up to 450 a week. 300 is hard to come by. It depends on the hours. But 300 is a great deal. I would say 350 to 450, sometimes 500 if they're it's a really good daycare and they just renovated their space. That's the range.
Okay.
Yeah.
Generate some significant revenue. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for putting that all together. I know that was a lot of work. Any other questions, thoughts? Cliff, where'd the mic go? Oh, you're gonna come up. Have to use this one? Okay. Did you use Zoom, Cliff?
Cliff and Zoom, mutually exclusive. Just ask a few people in the room. At any rate, no, the only question I really had was one that was just touched upon about the house. And my question is about the barn, about three essentials that it doesn't currently have, and that is electricity, water, and I hadn't even considered the sewage, but if one were to have restrooms out there, that would be an item too. And the other one is heating. So I just wondered what the plans were on that.
Sure. No, those are good questions. So what you could do is utilize the bathrooms in the house, actually, in the kitchen in the house. And one of the things that we've kind of kicked around as an idea is you could maybe build a breezeway between the house and the barn. There's a door, basically it matches up. And yeah, I think, yeah, and like a greenhouse and everything facility. Was that's something different? Yeah, it's gone through a lot, hasn't it? So, a breezeway. So yeah, and basically have a connection point to both the kitchen and the bathroom facilities. In terms of the installation and stuff, it would it would be limited in terms of when you could use it in season, just like the Holliston Historical Society does. And I don't have it right in front of me, but I think they use it from April. November, they're saying you're using it at basically at your own risk. But they do have, I think, some kind of supplemental heating that they utilize there. It's just not insulated. But that's something that we could look at too. The key is you get all of these ideas together, and you, like, it's like an amalgamation of ideas, and then you go out and get an expert who can talk to you about the feasibility of it and basically draw it out and say, okay, well, this is what something like that could look like. And then you figure out, okay, exactly what you need, what kind of estimate you're talking about. So there's a ways to go, but I think as Luba correctly pointed out, you put together like a vision and kind of like an idea of everything that you want to do there. That's your starting point. Okay. Yeah, does anybody online have some questions or comments?
Hi, this is Kate McDonald. I live right behind the Valentine estate, and I was listening tonight, and my biggest concern is where you said I'm really worried about who's going to maintain this land. You know, I had the Boy Scout troops down there cutting the trees, but from what I've been gathering about other meetings that have been going on is that the DPW doesn't even want to right now maintain the land, the grass of the schools and seed the grass. And who's going to maintain this land and making sure that it's properly cut and maintained, and like all the woods is maintained back so it doesn't overgrow again? Yeah, because that's a big issue, I think.
Yeah, Kate, I think that's a good question. And first of all, I don't think the DPW said they don't want to. I think they just, with their current staffing levels, they have a hard time maintaining everything that they're being asked to maintain. And the Parks and Rec Department, in collaboration with DPW, would be the ones that would have to maintain this property.
Right. So it would be under Kelly's at the rec center then. So would the management of this then fall under Kelly's? Like she would be the one running her programs then, or everything would be rental through her? So she would be the one that's managed the whole barn? And
that would be yet to be determined. I mean, Kelly would be part of the equation here for any kind of Parks and Recreation Department, for sure. But, you know, we haven't seen like what the organizational structure would look like or anything like that. We don't even know if we would have a space for them other than this space that we're talking about.
Right. Because all the programs that the lady said before, like Kelly runs an amazing preschool programs, which should be, expanded upon, which are always highly in need, which, programs like that. So that's something that, like, again, piggybacking off the lady before, yeah, my biggest concern is because I've said we've been dealing with that for Boy Scouts, helping out in other fields in town of making sure that someone is put in charge of maintaining the land.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah, Helen. Helen, you have your hand up, right?
Yes, I do. Hi, Helen Nicole. I wanted to comment that, and I love schools, nothing against schools, but I would be very concerned myself supporting a school, because I think that's going to severely limit other community involvement here. It's going to severely limit other community uses, I would think, especially during the week, because people coming onto a school property have to be there's a lot of things that go along with a school that would preclude other people from using that area. So I just want to really express my concern for that, because we've spent a lot of money on this. We're going to be spending a lot of money on this. And I really felt like this property was something that the people in the town wanted for the community to benefit from, for everyone, and not just one specific, school-age people. I mean, all people. And so I am a little concerned about that, and I just wanted to express that.
No, I appreciate that, Helen. And I think, one of the things, so this property is going to need a multitude of uses to make it feasible, right? It can't just lean on one particular thing. And so you can look at timing of different aspects and different activities. I mean, fortunately, not a lot of parties are going on during school days, right? Or, mini weddings or anything like that. But you do bring up a good point. You limit your scheduling time for some of those, we'll just call them revenue-generating events, like a wedding, if you're doing something like a school or have, weekly activities or things that require a certain schedule. So your point is well taken. Miles. Hey, Miles. Miles is one of the original Valentine Property Committee members.
Thank you, Michael. Just a quick point on the items brought up. I think that the one issue with a daycare type of thing is it would take an incredible amount of investment to bring that up to some place to a level that could support some sort of full-time childcare situation. I think it would be much better suited to work in the direction of being able to support school time programs for children to come in to do specifics there. But I think that comes to a lot later in this property would support a child care type situation as its direction that it's going in its redevelopment. One of the thing I wanted raised my hand for is to just suggest that a part of the process for having an avenue for support is to develop a nonprofit 501c3 type Friends of Valentine property type of, I'm not trying to give it an official name, but just the concept that could handle a lot of fundraising types of things, project support, volunteer creation for everything from semi-annual types of brush clearing and stuff like that. So it would take a lot of the load off of the Parks and Rec type of hiring of people to do some of these things that don't need to be done on a constant basis, but definitely need to keep the property up. So I just wanted to suggest that that's something be kept in mind that might help even fairly early in the process here is to develop. And I guess I have to look at how that dovetails with the town ownership and everything like that. But I believe one good example of this is the Friends of Minuteman National Historical Park. They do a lot of the fund related types of things in support of the park and volunteerism.
Awesome. Thank you, Miles. Julie, I see your hand's up.
Hi, Julie Nardone, 86 Elliott Street. An idea that I had, piggybacking on the nonprofit, was that it would be like this new model where it would be like a caretaker, nonprofit, events planner, and they would actually, it could be a family, it could be couples, it could be whatever, and they live on the second floor of the Valentine estate because housing is so expensive. That would take a lot of pressure off whoever runs the profit to have to make, tons and tons of money. So as part of this package, they would live upstairs, they could take care of the land, and they could do the events management. I don't know how this would work, but it flew into my head. So I wanted to share it. Thank you.
Thanks, Julie. All right, any other questions, comments from the audience or in Zoom land? Kate?
Oh, no, I already had my comment. I'm all set. Thank you.
Kate Jerzik, 11 Rodman Road. So I have a couple things. This speaks to me, and it's really, I kind of echo, I guess, of making sure we get people out, but the ideas floating around are really exciting. And I think we definitely need to either reconstitute the Valentine Committee or a new version of that to kind of keep interest, keep ideas flowing, and make sure that it's out in the community and it's not. I think when you have more people, the word gets spread out more, and it has a way to communicate with people. I also think, I agree with the self-sustaining, so I think that's great. I think if it ends up being a town department, that should probably be factored in the cost, because that would be going somewhere else. we would be paying for that somehow. It looks to me that it said hire an architect and engineer, and I would say we're not yet at that process, right? Because we'd be spending money to design what. We probably do need some help on when there's a tighter list of ideas to maybe investigate how they're feasible. I would support the 501c3 nonprofit. And then I do have a question. Is that new barn door like a historic reference? Because I've heard lots of people that don't like it. I don't like it. If you tell me it's historic, I'll be like, great, I'll celebrate it. But I hope that we can get something historic there.
Yeah, right now, the only thing historic about that barn door is the window, which is the original window. That, the X, if you will be painted black or stained black like the rest of the property. Or rest of the door, not the rest of the property. Oh my gosh. So, right, any other questions or comments? Yeah, Barbie.
Michael, have they addressed the traffic issue in that area yet?
Have they addressed the traffic issue in that area?
It should be addressed anyway.
No, there hasn't. So they haven't addressed the traffic issue. But I think actually you raise a good point, because one of the things that the select board and I are going to do after the marathon with Doug and his team's help is finally build that sidewalk on 135 from Marathon Mobile over to Franklin. So that should help, at least with the pedestrian access. So that is a whole other multi-million-dollar question. So. Okay, well, folks, Robin?
I know Doug and you guys have talked about putting a crosswalk to connect the state park, to connect the community center.
A crosswalk. Yeah, there's been, Doug, do you want to speak to the crosswalk?
Yeah, right now, step one is to put a crosswalk over by Edgewood. We've had a professional engineer design it, two of them actually, so we're in that process now. The signposts have been planted as far as the concrete and all that. But so that's phase one. Phase two is going to be the sidewalk after the marathon, and then a second crosswalk down by Indian Spring. Sorry, Mike. I don't think we're going to allow horse crossing though. So
no horse crossing, folks.
No one's going to catch us. No one's going to catch us.
All right. Everybody, I really appreciate your time, and oh, Yolanda.
Yolanda Greaves, 127 Prospect. We as a select board haven't had a lot of discussion, but Michael knows I've been one of the people saying, I'm glad we're restoring the barn, but what the heck are we going to do with this property? I think one of the meetings we had many years ago, I said the same thing. So to all of you sitting here, thank you for coming out. For all of you watching and following us on Zoom, however you're doing it, my request as a select board member, but again, this was not discussed, is that if you have thoughts or ideas on what was presented, on what was not presented, please reach out to the select board, reach out to Michael, give us your thoughts, because we've only heard from a handful of people as to what you think about these ideas. We had one idea presented that was great, using Park and Rec. The only way, as Kate has told us all, is that to really get community involvement, we need to hear from the community. This was one forum. I would suspect that as we get more information and we start making, some ideas based on what we've heard, there'll be another forum. We need your input. We need you to push back on ideas. We need you to say, oh, this I liked, this I didn't like, this works, this doesn't work. A discussion about traffic, a discussion about sidewalks, a discussion about all the things that are going to be impacted. The idea that can we do something with our community theater? Can we do something with our arts? Can we do something with our in-home business people? So I would ask that if you've been to this forum, give us your ideas, talk to people, get it back to the select board and to Michael, because that's how we can make a decision. And I don't think any of us want to wait another year before we do something. We have the barn finished. what can we be doing with it and with the property? Thank you. Email. Select board at Ashland, Mass.
Michael, one more comment. Sorry.
Yeah.
This will be my last, I promise. Has anyone thought of having a meeting at the barn, and so people can actually see it and feel it and touch it and say, look at this gentleman?
So Robin's question for those that couldn't hear is, have we thought about having a meeting at the barn? We've thought about it, but with the parking situation and some of the other limitations of it. You're going to open up your field? Okay, well then we might have solved the... Are you sure about that, Robin? Okay, I'm going to let you and Cynthia talk about that, and then we'll reconvene. How's that? Yeah, $20. It'll go fundraising. It'll be part of fundraising. Okay, Diane Montross.
Yep. Hi. I guess it'd be helpful if you could recap next steps. I know the request is made to provide feedback to the select board. It'd be helpful to understand, like, who do we reach out to? Is there an email address? What's the timeline around next steps? Is there another meeting? Do you have that information?
So Diane, we haven't scheduled another meeting, but if you want to provide feedback, the best way to do it would be to provide it over email, and that is selectboard@ashlandmass.com. And so all the select board members would get that, as well as myself and Jen Ball and Susan and Diane in our office. So that would be the best way to provide feedback, and we don't have a meeting scheduled yet. Okay. All right, thank you, everyone. This has been a good discussion. I appreciate all the ideas, and we will see you at the next meeting. Rob, you're going to close the...
Yeah. Again, well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Doug 1 and Doug 2, for all your help tonight. What's that? Which is...
I'm one.
Yeah. Cliff, you had to say that, right? Yeah. So anyway, this has been a great... okay, quiet down, you crowd. So thank you all for coming, and thanks for the people online. And just to follow up, I think what Yolanda did talk about getting information to us. I'm pretty sure we're going to put this on the agenda for the next meeting, unless I hear some objections, but I don't think so. So we'll do some follow-up and talk about next steps. And so meanwhile, feel free to continue getting us that information. So without further ado, is there a motion to adjourn here by... I didn't actually see. Did she? Okay. Is there a second? Okay. All those in favor of adjourning say aye. Aye. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.